There is a region of wilderness in the north of Portugal where monsters dwell. Some of those monsters are villagers masked and dressed as Caretos.
Hello and welcome to Tantrum House Studio Awesome. I'm Katie.
And I'm Ryan. In this video, we will review Caretos by Mebo. It's a 2 to 4 player strategic movement game with asymmetric abilities.
Each player is randomly dealt 2 monster cards and a secret final bonus card. Each monster card has 3 different abilities that are activated by certain card symbols.
Each turn, a player will play a card from their hand, following any mandatory actions, and then activating one of their monster abilities. Monsters are attempting to scare groups of villagers and then capture any isolated villagers.
In the meantime, the NPC Caretos will be scaring and removing villagers from the board. The Caretos are moved by players as they discard cards or if they have monster abilities that move them. Caretos will also send monsters off the board, they'll have to be bought back to return to play, or by sending another monster off the board.
Players can buy back their monsters that are captured by the Caretos by paying 3 campfires. Campfires are gathered by scaring a group of villagers. Campfires can also purchase bonus point cards, add extra movement to a monster, or will allow you to activate 2 monsters in a single turn.
Bonus cards will give you a goal for scaring or for gathering villagers, and then will give you extra points at the end of the game.
The game ends when the last villager is captured, or when the draw pile is gone. Each player will count up their villagers for 1 point each, and then add in any bonus card points, including the secret final bonus.
Now, this game has a lot of really fun art and some really neat components. There's these neat, clear pieces that the Caretos and the monsters are both on, so that's really interesting to see that. I don't know that I've seen that in a game before. There's probably another game that does it. I'm not thinking of it. But that's really fun. The main part of this game to me was setting up your turns for the future, and I really struggled with that.
Yeah, that definitely is something I struggle with as well. I usually play like, what can I do this turn to score the most points? But that's not what you need to be doing, because you're going to scare on one turn and probably capture villagers the next turn or a couple turns down the road. So you need to think ahead or get your monsters to work in conjunction, where one monster is down the road, so when you scare, you funnel them straight to your monster.
And that's great if you can get it to do that. A drawback to using that plan, though, is the Caretos. Your opponents, if they're moving the Caretos, you've got 2 monsters that could be easily hit by Caretos and then shunted off the board. So I feel like, it's very hard to do that. Also, the monsters have really different types of movement, and it's really hard to get them to where they're synced enough in their movement to be able to be in those locations to just get that, those villagers sent to them immediately. I did never get that to happen. Ryan got that to happen a couple of times, so maybe it was just my inability to plan ahead. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely did like the components, like you were saying. They didn't blow me away. They're like, oh, you won't believe how amazing these components are. But they were much higher quality than I was expecting, and the art was really, really good. It's not like too scary, but I mean, they're monsters, but they're kind of fun monsters.
They're really interesting looking monsters. I really enjoyed, I think it's one that's like the Boogeyman. And
Trevor.
And Trevor.
Yeah.
They all have these interesting names, and then there's Trevor. I'm like, oh, What's Trevor doing? I don't know. What's his story?
They have player aids that are language independent, and those are very helpful to remind you exactly the rules regarding how the Caretos and the monsters move, and I really appreciated those.
They were easy to understand. I told Ryan, he was teaching me how to play, and I said, I think I'm gonna guess what happens based on these language independent things here. And I told him, I said, this is what happens, and he said, oh yeah, that's pretty much right. And I was like, yes. I was like, they did well with those language independent images for me to figure out.
I also appreciated that the meeples of the little villagers are all a different cutout. They're all, I mean, they're different colors, but they're also different shapes because they're in different poses. And I appreciate that they went just that extra step to differentiate them just a little bit more.
There's a lot of neat movement abilities and different abilities that are on each of the monsters, which makes them interesting. You have things that like let you jump from one location to the other, but each monster has a different set of places that he can jump to. And there are some monsters that let you move the Caretos like fairly often. I played with a monster that let you move the Caretos, so I felt like I was constantly like stalking Ryan's monsters down with those. I was like, this is my only chance to defeat Ryan, is try to catch him with these with these things. So that was pretty interesting. I did find, however, that it was a little bit difficult if you end up with two monsters that have similar icons needed to activate similar movement styles or powers. It could be a little bit difficult because you may really need a monster to be able to move to collect stuff, and you just can't find that symbol because they both require the same symbol for movement. It ideally would be that you had a monster that would give you movement with a this symbol, a red symbol, and then you'd have a monster that gave you movement with a yellow symbol, so that if you got the red here, you could use it. If not, you could use the yellow over here, or with blue, or, something like that.
Yeah. I think you had a situation where your monster that had red movement ended up in the cauldron. Your monster without red movement was out, and then you just kept getting red cards, so you weren't able to move that monster.
Yes, I did.
So that could be very frustrating. I did have two other points that I struggled with, was remembering that when you get a bonus card, you can't use it that turn. You have to use it on a future turn. So I struggled with cheating on it. I just kept doing it.
Yeah.
It was very hard for me to just remember, I can't use this turn, because it's just so easy to be like, I could redeem this right away. Let me buy it and redeem it. But that's not how it works. You have to plan ahead. Not my forte. So remember that. Can't use bonus cards in the turn that you gain them.
Yeah, that was really hard. I tried to do that several times myself.
Then the other thing that I struggled with is your monsters, they do have one ability that lets them jump between different places on the board, wells to wells, or between the village icons and so forth. But that's only if they use that color ability. Like if it's
not when they're just
yellow,
moving anytime.
So I, without thinking, just got into the habit of being like, this guy, he's moving, but it's not that. But when he moves, he can move between wells. Well, no. It has to be that color in order to move between the wells. So
this may be why Ryan won. He was cheating on two different fronts.
Well, I won twice, but who knows if it was correct or not. So. But we're definitely looking forward to playing it again.
Yeah. So there is a lot of interesting stuff with this. The map is interesting and fun, and for me, I just couldn't scare enough people. The little campfires that come out, the campfires appear every time two people come together and end up in the same location, the two villagers, or at least two, more than that. In the cards that you play down, you may be playing cards that make people gather together too. So you have situations where on your turn everything was scattered and you could have gone and picked a whole bunch up, but suddenly they're all running together and now they're in big groups again. You're gonna have to scare everybody. So that was interesting.
Yeah, so the more players you play with, the more likely that's going to happen. So if you scare on your turn but you don't capture, the likelihood that they'll be regrouped by the time it comes back to your turn is higher with more players. So what you're going to want to do is sort of follow the other players around and leech off of the ones that they're scaring.
Yeah, hopefully that's what you would do. But anyway, so it was really fun. There was, like I said, there's like the movement, the specific movement. I hesitate to call it tactical movement. It's like definitely, you have to be spatially aware. You have to be aware of what others might be doing on their turns too. And there, like I said, there's a strong like timing thing with this because you can't fulfill cards on the turn that you get them, and you can't activate more than one monster unless you pay 3 campfires or unless you match up 2 symbols on cards that are in the little corners that you don't get very often. So you have to, there's very few times you get to activate both of your monsters, and you have to just be really careful with how you're moving. It feels like the way it looks like feels like it'd be a really whimsy kind of game, and it actually is super approachable because it's very easy to understand the concepts, very easy to like take it in, but there's a lot of thought that has to go into, okay, 2 or 3 movements down the road I need to make sure this is happening.
Yeah. So we definitely enjoyed Caretos, and if you think it's interesting, check it out. And be sure to stay tuned to our channel for more board gaming video content like this.
By selling off some, I got real lost there. Sorry.